We got everybody. Robert and I are very, very
We tried to do that for the city plan. It never works right.
Oh, then you're gonna love my new project. Yeah, my new project is Let's go. That's my project. That's my project. And you know why? Because there was not enough money for private companies. So all of the last employment
Every time I show up, it's just like
so we need to make sure that
salad at once. It's like, I'm not
you got involved in my family charades and you didn't even know, right? So what are you doing now? Yes. Even when he's not actually it's that's a benefit of working for an organization that I was sharing earlier. I think it's Friday afternoon because we're trying to balance everything. Right?
Robert, you want to come on up and get us started? Or however you want to do it. All right. Thanks again. We're going to have you keep welcoming us because we're so thankful to the painters for hosting us and feeding us. Thank you guys.
And I know there's plenty, so if you need some more, get some more.
Thank you.
Whatever's left, we just give it to the assistant in the back. You know, like your kids,
You got to be a
they'll take care of it. All right. Hopefully everybody got a little something to eat and you enjoyed it. We're going to bring this back together. I have the honor of introducing this next person who I know we've known each other for quite a few years now. I remember our former political director, Keith, who retired, was receiving calls from somebody named Haley Stevens back in the day, kind of updating us on what was going on, and I didn't know who that was at the time, but, you know, eventually we met Haley, and, you know, she ran for office here in Michigan, and I could say that she is a great friend of labor, specifically to this union, the Painters and Allied Trades. We've constantly kept in contact on what's going on, and she's helped make our organization better, right? Just working together. And I could say, you know, one thing, it's tough. A lot of things go on in politics, you know, but one thing with Haley that I could say is she has the drive and the knowledge, and she has integrity, which is huge for me, right, and my staff. Well, without that being said, I'm going to get out of the way, but I just want to introduce the one and only Congresswoman Haley Stevens.
To say it. It was so nice.
I've been wanting to say it.
And I got Julia here from my DC team, and she was here. We're running from the other side of the district, and she said, "This is how you enter the building." She's sending it to Mike, who's in the car with me, and I'm like, "No, this is like my second home." Like, I'm here all the time. I know where we're going, but I didn't know there was going to be chicken shack. And please save me some potatoes. This is so exciting. And this is just a real long time coming, this event that my friends from, you know, our environmental quadrant suggested. Blue Green Alliance, League of Conservation Voters, my friends from EDF, and obviously our incredible friends from the building trades, and particularly the painters. This idea was shared with me on Zoom about bringing together a cross-functional group from our district, Michigan's 11th district, and with our trades to talk about our bill, our Inflation Reduction Act. And like all good bills that are really big and transformative, and you know, the largest climate bill in history, and hundreds of billions of dollars, and then we go into implementation mode. And what you're seeing here today is the best of government. We've got local leaders, we've got state leaders, we've got nonprofit leaders, we've got union leaders that are gathered here to exchange information and share and learn from one another. And Courtney, I was so glad to hear your presentation. I was really hoping I'd be able to see it. It's everything I thought it was going to be. And I'm also excited because the questions that are going to be asked and that we reserved for this format are really quite important. And what I'll just share is this. You know, to my left here is Kermit Williams, who is the jack of all trades for Oakland County and Michigan's 11th district, and I'm so thrilled to be up here with him. And why I'm pointing to Kermit is because he, with his work at Oakland Ford, is really in our neighborhoods. His organization is in our neighborhoods. It's doing not just the political door knocking because an election is approaching, but it's doing that social advocacy work. It's doing that work of you matter. And the bills that we pass in Washington matter to everyday residents. And the struggle is, have you heard? Have you learned? Do you realize that this is impacting you? And how do we, as government actors, empower you? And I say this not just for residents, but looking at my friend Angela Rosensus, who's on the Warren Commission, and my friend Brandon Colo on the commission, Vicki Barnett, he's in Royal Oak, and our mayor from Royal Oak, Mark Fournier, is here, and Vicki Barnett. You know, you are doing this work at the local level. The dollars are going to come from state to local. And what we don't want to have is this milieu and this mess and this lack of coordination. What we want to be is who we've always been in Michigan, which is the leaders, the best practice. And so I'm off to Washington. Please pray. Because they were having us vote to protect gas stoves. You know, that's their response to the largest climate bill in history. And, you know, my friend, with Elizabeth with the Mom's Clean Air here is, you know, they're focused on the dollar so our kids can breathe fresh air, and that nothing is more palpable than what we just lived through with the wildfires, and obviously this recognition that the hottest days ever recorded on planet Earth are upon us. Now, are we gonna run around afraid? Well, certainly it's a wake-up call, but part of the wake-up call is the willingness to lead. And that's what every single person at this table has dedicated themselves to today. You know, and from the SEMCOG and our great friends at the Blue Green Alliance as well, coming together in a willingness to lead, to coordinate these dollars. It was a once-in-a-lifetime thing to watch this IRA get passed. And I'll just conclude with this, because we're in a really special place at a special time. When the Inflation Reduction Act passed, it was August. We're usually not lawmaking in August. We came back in, we were gonna pass this bill. And we, at the time, because we were still coming out of COVID, we still had proxy votes. So some people weren't there voting. I was there voting. I was privileged to be able to be there. And the privilege was that Nancy Pelosi, who was Speaker of the House, you know, in her great career, was chairing the gavel, you know, holding the gavel, chairing the gavel, tears in her eyes as this bill was being passed for the climate, the whole prescription drug component as well, doing real things for real people. So thank you, my friends, for gathering here today. This is just a real capstone to the work that's just beginning, because we have decided to change our country, to change the world, and bring everyone along with us. So cheers.
Congresswoman, there was a heart at the foul, but I just want to, first of all, my name is Frank Houston. I'm with the Blue Green Alliance. I'll give a quick intro in a minute, but just on behalf of everyone in the room, you know, thank you for your work, your friendship, your leadership, and obviously when you look at things like the IRA and the, you know, the bipartisan infrastructure law as well, the impact is there, and we just owe a big debt of thanks. So thank you. So this is the format for our roundtable. This is designed to be a conversation and a little bit informal, so we really can have some give and take and hear from as many people as possible today. The way it's set up, we have some pre-canned questions that we're gonna kind of do the prime the audience a little bit and get some conversation started. As facilitator, I'll be helping direct a few of those to get us started on a few of those. If someone really has a point that they're burning to say or a question they really want to raise, don't be shy about raising your hand like Ms. Tina from EDUP is doing.
Hi.
Sorry, go ahead.
I just want to remind everybody on the panel that we are on Facebook Live, and we also have a Zoom link live, so thank you.
And a few other quick reminders in terms of camera, and this is a public event, so there are a few members of the press here. Just my request for members of the press is, other than our Facebook Live audience, we're trying to keep this a little less on camera beyond that. So just if you need pull aside quotes from any of the people talking today, we'll have time at the back end while we're doing the tour and kind of some mingling if you need a press avail from any of our participants today. But I want us to get going into questions really quick. And once again, my name is Frank Houston with the Blue Green Alliance. For those who aren't aware, we're a coalition that was founded and is still comprised of many of the largest labor unions and environmental organizations in the country. One of the things that many of the groups here do, aside from the PowerPoint you saw from Evergreen, which is great, we try to make these big, complicated bills as accessible as possible to the public, to the rank and file. We're trying to figure out how to access these dollars to local electeds and leaders. There's some materials in the back if you haven't seen them. Among them, our group puts out these little user guides, which are really handy. So if you want a cheat sheet summary of all the things, and this one is for the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA. But we also have a hard copy one, and these available online for Bill. We do a lot of information on ARPA, a lot of these other programs. And if you grab this little QR code thing, you can pull up a whole lot of reports, including a very well-known one we just did on public buildings, much that we talked about earlier during Evergreen's presentation. And also the painters have put out some great materials as well. Just flagging that. And with that, let's get started on a roundtable. And once again, we're not doing intros, we're cutting right to the chase with questions. And first up, the first one I'm going to pose to, this isn't Big Brother on the screen. This is an important man from the painters nationally, Mr. John Doherty. I hope John can hear me okay. His flight got canceled.
On that note,
I can kind of hear everybody.
yeah, so if you, for his questions, you might want to actually get a little closer.
So John, I'm going to come creep toward the screen here for our first question. And sorry, John's flight got canceled. Wonder if it had something to do with our fabulous climate issues we're having. For those who don't know John, with the Painters, he plays a role as the senior advisor to the president for the Painters nationally. It's great. So with that, John, opening question to kick us off. President Biden has made it clear that the jobs created from Bill and IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, must have robust labor standards.
Frank, I'm sorry, could you speak directly into the, it's
Sorry.
not a, you, unless you're real close, I don't think the mic is picking you up
John, can you hear me now?
perfectly.
All right. Sorry. I'm just going to keep blocking Bethany out. So John, first question's for you, my friend. President Biden has made it clear that the jobs created from Bill as well as the Inflation Reduction Act must have robust labor standards attached. Can you talk a little bit about how state and city governments help the president keep this commitment and ensure that labor standards are attached to infrastructure and climate-related projects? Thank you. I'll move out of the way of the screen.
Thanks everybody, and welcome to the 21st century technology we have here. So the administration, in working with the federal agencies, they're basically looking for a triple win, the climate impact, the social impact, and workforce development. So a lot of the investments that are coming down not only have labor standards within the selection criteria, they're prioritized, and also a lot of the funding has workforce development funds to scale our registered apprenticeship programs, to create pre-apprenticeship programs. A lot of the money can even be used to promote those workforce development programs and come up with outside-the-box ideas like tying your summer youth programs to pre-apprenticeship, so on and so forth. So within a lot of the labor standards, you have equity levers that are prioritized that I mentioned, like workplace diversity. A lot of things that need to be addressed in the application is a workforce diversity plan, your local hire plan, whether or not you intend to utilize apprenticeships and registered apprenticeship programs. Those all play into the competitive grants and whether or not you are competitive against other states. So me being not a federal agency, that is our best take, being that we work with them almost on a daily basis in a lot of areas that they're lifting up. You see workforce hubs starting to sprout up. Good Jobs, Great Cities is another initiative out of DOL. They're looking to implement this in a way that it's uniform across the board, that this is the way that we're doing business. That with these federal infrastructure investments, we also have robust workforce development programs that ensure people are going into good paying jobs with health coverage and benefits. So I hope that answers that question, and I hope everybody can hear me there.
We can hear you, John, even if you can't hear me. Thank you. We're going to keep going with a few more of the pre-prepared questions. And then once again, we will open it up for extra questions, comments, thoughts people have to allow like 15 minutes for that. So second question is targeted at some of our state legislative friends who are here today, specifically Senator Chang and Representative McKinney to start. And we might put Representative Stone on the spot for a little too. So state and local governments have a huge role to play in administering programs made possible by these massive, unprecedented federal investments contained in the IRA. For our state lawmakers on the panel, that's obviously you all, what is your role in implementing these funding opportunities, and what sort of challenges or opportunities do you see that these federal dollars enable?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks so much for organizing this. I think it's a really important roundtable. I feel like every week we learn some more new details about all the amazing things in the IRA and IIJA, and so it's really exciting. That was a great presentation. You know, the state has a huge role that we play, and I think that we've begun to play that, and hopefully we will continue to play an even stronger role. Want to highlight, I'm sure Rep. McKinney will highlight this as well, a lot of good things that were in the budget we just passed a couple weeks ago that are very much directly related to both of the federal pieces of legislation. So, you know, very excited about the $125 million for matching grants for electric school buses, $21 million for clean energy and EV infrastructure, $1 million to help begin the transition of Michigan's own state fleet to electric vehicles. And I think of interest to a lot of folks in this room, $212 million around residential energy efficiency improvements through the federal funds that are available. And then $5.5 million for the Michigan Saves, which is a really exciting program that I know Sterling Heights is very familiar with, incentivizing private investment in clean energy improvements at the local level. So that's just some of the things. There's so much more in the budget that hopefully Rep. McKinney will expand on. So I think the state has a huge role, obviously, in administering some of the funds. But in addition, as was talked about a little bit earlier, the state also does have a huge role to play in terms of making sure that we're also passing the policies needed to move us to a clean energy future. Because if we don't do that, some of this stuff may be, short-lived. So we've got to make sure that we are changing some of those policies. Our governor, Gretchen Whitmer, a few years ago, maybe it was last year, everything is kind of a blur. In recent years, unveiled the My Healthy Climate Plan, which was, a really exciting document with a lot of great ideas. Now that we have a different makeup of the legislature, we have the opportunity, and we've got to make sure we don't lose that opportunity to actually codify a lot of what was in that plan in order to help draw down some of this money available at the federal level, and also to just really, again, move us towards the future. So I'll just highlight a couple of the things that I think are really exciting about the clean energy package that was introduced in the Senate, and I believe some of the bills were introduced in the House as well. One is around the electric grid, codifying the plan to generate 60% of our state's electricity from renewables. We've got the clean fuel standard piece of legislation, which I think is going to be huge. A lot around repairing and decarbonizing homes and businesses, again, very much connected to what's in the IRA and IIJA. An energy waste reduction target bill to make sure that we are putting that into statute and moving us toward that future. I know a lot of folks are probably very excited about the bill related to the MPSC and making sure that they must prioritize health, climate, equity, and affordability. And I know that one bill that was not yet introduced but was recommended by some of our labor stakeholders that I'm really excited about is this piece around making sure that we have an Office of Just Transition, which again is very related to a lot of what we're talking about, to make sure that as we are moving towards the future, that we are very focused on what that clean energy future has got to be, very focused on making sure that those jobs are good paying union jobs, and that as we're changing what our energy infrastructure looks like, the way that we're looking at energy efficiency and all of these things, that we're actually creating jobs, but also preparing workers who may be in jobs that are going to go away, to make sure that they are given the opportunities for training and transition to the jobs of the future. So those are a couple things. I feel like we've got so much more that we need to do, but we're headed down the path and excited about the opportunity.
Thanks, Senator. A representative?
Great. Good afternoon, everybody. Donovan McKinney here, state rep out of the 14th district, right next door. I have majority of Warren, all of Center Line and Macomb County in Northeast Detroit. I just want to echo the points my colleague made in the Senate, Senator Chang. I'm an appropriations guy, so I sit on appropriations committee. That is your money committee. I'm on 6 subcommittees. All I do is approach. So we passed the historic amount in this budget, $81 billion. And it's a lot of it is due, and I got to give graces and big ups and thanks to Congresswoman Haley Stevens, our partners on the federal level, because we're using those dollars efficiently. One of the things we are doing is something, so we're not only doing lead service line replacements, we're using that money to really fix the grid and a lot of the old infrastructure. But one of the things that I've been a part of in terms of a legislative package, dealing with energy and reliability. We all know the issues in our region very well. One being the climate incident that happened in late February with the ice storms, right? I have people in my own district who were out for 45 consecutive days. Just think about it, 45 consecutive days. I've had reports to me. Now, these are reported. Now, it could be a lot more unreported, but 7 deaths in my own district alone. 7 deaths because of that ice storm. And so this is absurd to live in America, right? Where it's the wealthiest country in the world, and we're still going through reliability energy issues. One of the things that I'm focusing on with my colleague, State Rep Jen Hill, she's out of Marquette, the lone Democrat up there in the UP. And she's fighting for her life up there, so we definitely did help her out for next year. But one of the things we came together on is using these and really matching these dollars with the Fed dollars in and leveraging the state funding as well is something we call, battery storage and solar storage, and looking at opening up community solar as an option. One of the things we're trying to do, and her bill specifically requires the Michigan Public Service Commission, who regulates our utility systems here in the state, really looking at putting guidelines together for folks, for the MPSC to allow individuals, homeowners, to be able to be independent generators and collect and store, whether it's battery storage or solar. My bill, on top of that, couples it to expand access to low and middle income people. Because my district is full of low and middle income people, and a lot of the funding that's coming down from the feds, a lot of this opportunity, people that look like me, people that look like my district, who literally are working class folks, first of all, don't know that these resources exist. Second of all, aren't taking advantage of it. And so we have to really, it's the disconnect. We have to figure out how to bridge those gaps. And this is something we're working on, and I'm proud of the legislation we're looking to do. And it's all due to the federal funds that are coming in. We're leveraging more than just that. We're trying to figure out how to, for the lack of a better term, we're trying to figure out how to save people lives. Because in the meantime, when we're trying to figure out how to fix the grid, it's going to take time to repair it, because it took time for it to get this bad. I mean, DTE has come to me, we've been in meetings, they went on record in Lansing, they came to Lansing and said to us in the committee that they have power lines in operation, especially in the city of Detroit, from the 1910s. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I wanted to slap somebody, because I'm like, no wonder why our power keeps going out. There's not a day that goes by. I have 4 neighborhoods in my district right now, I just checked before coming here, that is out of power right now. And guess what? It's sunny, no wind in sight, right? And this is what people have to go through. They're suffering. And so what we're gonna do to mitigate this crisis is gonna take time to fix it, but in the meantime, how can we put money in people's pockets to not only transition to a clean energy future, but as well as try to solve and mitigate the crises that are going on right now. Because like I said before, and I'm gonna end it here, people are dying. Like, people are dying, and we have the resources to fix it. And so, like I said before, I'm a big appropriations guy. I'm all about the money, and we're funding it down to the people that are the most vulnerable. And I have to say this too before I wrap up. In boilerplate language in appropriations, and I was able to get this through the MPSC, we're requiring the Public Service Commission to host meetings outside of their Ingham County Lansing bubble. Because right now they're not necessarily required to go into the community and hear them out. And hear their plea, hear their cry for help. So we're requiring them to do it 4 times a year. They must travel across the state. Out of those 4 times, one of them must be in Detroit. The other time they have to go in Grand Rapids, the west side of the state. But they have to go out here in these communities and recognize that, you know what, things have to change. Things have to change. And then we have to hold our big utilities accountable, like DTE and Consumers Energy, because if we don't, more people are going to be dying on the wayside. And guess what? Our elders are suffering from it. Our kids are suffering from it. And I'm just tired of seeing it. I'm tired of going through it. And I don't want to take too much of your time, Frank, but to really bring this point home. My son is 17 months old. The day we brought him home from the hospital, my wife and I, we had a 4-day power outage. He spent his first 4 days on this earth in the hotel room. Now I'm able to afford it because I have the means to do so, I have the opportunity. But a lot of folks in my community, the district I represent, guess what? They can't afford it. And what do what do these places, hotels, motels, do when there's mass fire outages? They jack the rates up. And so folks have to literally, because of their economic situation, they have to literally suffer. And a lot of them can afford what? They can't afford generators, right? That's why this battery storage and solar storage is so important. And so we're trying to connect the dots here because we understand the plea and the plight our people are going through. So I'll pass it, and I just appreciate the time.
Thanks, Representative.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Frank, can I jump in on this one?
You should have.
Vicki Barnett, Mayor of Farmington Hills. Last week I participated on a panel that the MPSC hosted dealing with justice and inequity and the power grid. This has been a problem. It doesn't matter if they live in your district or they live in my district. We have people who are suffering everywhere across the state because of the unreliability of the grid. DTE will tell you it's because the population hasn't grown enough to support their rate increases and for them to transition properly. That's part of it. But your citizens and the citizens in South Lyon are paying the same rate per kilowatt hour to DTE. Yet your citizens are suffering with lines that were built in 1910, and South Lyon has brand new lines. And in between that transition from downtown Detroit to South Lyon and Oakland County, there are communities that grew up, and the older communities have the older lines and older equipment. I've suggested to the MPSC that instead of just talking about kilowatt rates per hour, that you have equity in that. You have older lines, you pay a cheaper rate because you're not getting the same service. You have newer lines, you pay a higher rate because you haven't paid impact fees to offset the cost of sprawl. And one of the questions I have later on for SEMCOG is why are we keep building and widening roads to nowhere when we have infrastructure needs to repair the infrastructure where the infrastructure currently exists and it's falling apart? We as a state can no longer support the cost of sprawl. $12 million a mile for a 2-lane road. $12 million a mile. Then you add to it a power line, an electric line, a gas line, whatever else, water line, sewer line. It costs us over $60 million a mile for sprawl. So when we put $2 billion into widening I-75 so people can get further out to Clinton Township and wherever else they are, we were offsetting that cost by charging the rest of us $60 million for every mile that we stretch that out. In Oakland County, it's the same thing. Right now we're spending money on putting in a flex lane on 696. $60 million a mile. We can't afford it. And it's not fair for the people who live in hollowed out cities that are not getting the investment in the infrastructure that they need to be paying the same rate as the people who live further out that have the best service, the consistent service, and the newer equipment. Last weekend, a transformer blew at Grand River and Haggerty Road in Farmington Hills on the concrete. This was a tree trimming, folks. They can tell you tree trimming is part of it. But their equipment is blowing up on site because they're not taking care of it. And it hurts my resident and it hurts your residents. But more importantly, the justice involved and the injustice involved is you and I can afford, okay, our electricity goes out, fine, we'll go to the store, we'll replace the medicine and our insulin, we'll replace this, we'll replace our freezer food, everything else. But if you're on unemployment, if you're on SNAP benefits, if you are on Medicaid, you can't afford that.
I don't want to cut you off, I don't want to confirm, but I think that's a really important you're bringing
And
up.
that's where the legislature comes in. $35 as a replacement fee for the $25, that would buy you 4 dozen eggs if you were lucky in January.
Can I add real
Sure.
quick?
I want to give Regina a chance.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I just went.
No, I appreciate it.
Really, this is a really big issue for everybody in this state.
Absolutely. Mayor, you're absolutely right.
And they have no local elected officials on their board of directors. And we're not requiring them to even have a roundtable with local, county, and other officials.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I do have to say that, remember the story I brought up with my son bringing him home? We got denied that at the time it was $25 credit. And at the time you're supposed to, I think with mass projects, it was more than 10% of people out on the grid. You have to be out 96 consecutive hours in order to receive the $25 credit. Now MPSC raises it to $35. But what in the heck that's going to do? What that's going to happen? And then, like I said before, my son is 17 months old. We have lost power 12 times since he's been alive. For a total, y'all going to be surprised, total of 52 days.
So have some of my residents in Farmington Hills.
52 days. So, you know, this issue hits home to me because I got to go home to my wife and deal with this as a state legislator. And we have the means and the power to do something about it. The question is, can we get everybody on the same page? And do they have the goals? And I can say some other things, but do they have the courage to step up and fight these utilities?
And later I'll talk about Comcast and broadband.
Yeah. That's what's going on.
I want to ask at least one or two more questions really quick, and then we do want to open up for some continued questions and conversation, both formally and informally. And also, we know the Congresswoman will have to leave about 1:30, so just as an FYI.
I'm staying as long as I can.
I know she wants to hear this.
And I told my team to look into insurance mitigation on this stuff, because people are paying insurance, and like Vicki said, they're getting the $25.
Oh,
So-
it's 35 now.
Yeah.
And you don't have to ask because they have smart meters, which is what I told them a long time ago.
So,
Thank you.
oh, no, of course.
They know who's out and how.
And also, we'll keep connecting folks after this meeting. This isn't designed just to be a one-off conversation. But I wanted to take a chance, for those who don't know Regina Strong, she's our environmental justice advocate for Michigan. And Regina was hoping that maybe you could kick off a follow-up question along these lines when we talk about equity and the way some of these federal programs, including the Justice 40 initiative, I think we all understand that the idea is that to make sure that these funds are going to communities that aren't always benefiting or too often are left behind. But I guess if you could talk about, as examples, within IRA, there's bonus tax credits for clean energy, right? There's projects that are designed to take traditional fossil fuel communities and help them transition with strong labor standards attached to it. And I'm just wondering if you can talk a little bit about how you think as a state or local communities can focus on equity, utilizing Justice 40 initiatives, utilizing these federal dollars to make sure that we actually have a just transition, as Senator Chang referenced earlier. Just open-ended question if you want to offer a few thoughts.
Sure. One of the things you've heard a lot about already is the equitable part of this. There are some people who are starting at a disadvantage. They're already having disparate impact from things like everything from, coal plants, poor air quality for manufacturing, a lot of things. And so I think the challenge and the opportunity is with Justice 40, it mandates that 40% of the benefit of all of this funding goes to underserved communities, overburdened communities. Where the challenge is in that edict is, how do you define benefit and who benefits, and how do you ensure that the people who truly have justice issues are the ones who are getting the benefit? And I think there are a couple ways that we can ensure that, because it can happen at the state level through legislation, it can happen within programs in the state, but it also has to happen at the local level. And I think we have to better identify the who and the how. We talked a lot about utilities, but that's just the tip of the iceberg, right? Communities face a lot of things when you are in an environmental justice community, or justice is part of your issue. As we talk about climate, the communities that can least afford to recover from it are the hardest hit, whether it's flooding, whether there's issues with old infrastructure, electrical, there are pipes in the ground from the early 90s as well. And, back then, making everything out of lead seemed like a good idea. So we've got all these lead pipes in the ground that have to come out. And when you think about how this money can be spent better a lot of that, to Vicki's point, has a lot to do with where you start and where you invest and how you bring, you know, a real equitable lens to this. You know, one of the things from a just transition standpoint that I think is really important is that there is a strong historical link to those communities and those people who have right now disparate impact and the lack of economic opportunity. There's a lot of money, we've heard, coming through the pike. How do we ensure that the people who get to do the work are incorporating people from communities that have had the most impact? Because it's not just enough to say it's going to benefit the community overall. Personal economics need to benefit too in communities that have had disparate impacts. So I would just say, as we talk more about how this funding can be used, it's not just the how, it's the who. Who's involved in the decisions? Who's involved in the conversations, and who gets the work? I think that's a critical piece. Just want to add that.
I'm going to ask maybe 2 more questions, and then we'll open it up for a lot of the other folks who haven't been heard to kind of bring their thoughts, their questions, their ideas to the discussion, particularly all of our local electeds who came out, which is great. Next question from my woman, right? For those who don't know Elizabeth, she's great. She's with Moms Clean Air Force. And I was hoping, Elizabeth, if you could talk a little bit about, you know, there's just a lot of programs in IRA bill that are designed from planting trees to building solar installations, how we track air pollution, basically how do we make our buildings and communities safer for our families. I was just wondering if you could talk about some of the programs that stood out to you and where you see the opportunity to promote public health, make our families safer, our air quality better, et cetera.
Thank you for that question.
Yeah.
I'm with Moms Clean Air Force. We're a national organization, over 1.5 million moms and dads that are working on air quality issues and fighting for the climate crisis that we're all dealing with right now. As a mom of a son and a niece who has asthma, I can say the Inflation Reduction Act has definitely put my mind at ease. The IRA will definitely significantly reduce pollution, resulting in over 100,000 fewer asthma attacks in 2030. It also positions us closer to President Biden's climate goal. Across Michigan, there are over 177,000 children who suffer from asthma. And the IRA means less asthma attacks. It means less trips to the hospital, missed school days, outdoor activities, and a lessened burden on our healthcare system. The IRA will lower greenhouse gas emissions, which is a win-win for families and helps stem extreme weather events caused by climate change. This also improves local air quality. As we have all suffered from the wildfires in Canada, we all experienced poor air quality, and I think that was just a very significant thing for a lot of Michiganders who didn't really think about those issues. They thought that was a California problem. Well, it's not. And extreme weather is going to keep these wildfires going in places that are close to home. So with poor air quality, there are a lot of times where families like myself and other families who have this chronic illness in their family, we have to worry about making sure we have an inhaler all the time in the summer. We are checking the air quality to make sure it's safe for our families to go outside. And a lot of times our families miss out on things. Our son has to stay home and he cannot go to his swim meet, or he can. Or times that we've been out in public trying to enjoy our summer day and the air quality just is terrible. Sometimes we have to rush home and use his nebulizer treatment, and when that isn't effective, we end up in an ER, which is scary for him and for our families. So my son, like I said, better air quality is a real intangible positive impact on my family's life, as well as hundreds of thousands of families here in Michigan. So we're excited about all the possibilities in reducing tailpipe emissions, making sure we're doing the investments in homes, making sure air quality is safe inside as well as outside the home. There's a lot of studies going on. Wayne State University is doing one with the Asthma and Allergy Foundation, and they're looking at every Detroit zip code to see what the air quality issues are for residents in those areas. So help families advocate for themselves and be able to really identify what's going on in their communities so they can ask for these funds and demand them from our local representatives and make sure that we're taking care of our families and making sure that they're healthy and their air quality is good.
So just just on a time check, I know it's almost 1:30. I think we understand the Congresswoman at some point will have to leave, but I'd love to open this up for a good 15 minutes or so to hear from all those who haven't had a chance to weigh in, offer what they're experiencing tied to IRA and bill, opportunities, best practices that our local communities are doing. We also have several other community-based groups that are here. I know I saw United Way of Southeastern Michigan. I know I saw Faith in Action, Eileen from Faith in Action, obviously Kermit's up here. So I want to open it up to just other thoughts, comments our electeds and our other base groups have. I'll start with Kermit.
Kermit Williams, Oakland Forward, also former City Council President in Pontiac. One of the things I don't want to miss in this opportunity, Frank, is the fact that we have to leverage this opportunity. This can't be one-time money or something that we push in. We had a huge opportunity with neighborhood stabilization when President Obama was elected, right? That money came into communities like Pontiac, and there was a huge disparity in how the money was actually used and leveraged in order to make these communities better. There's a misnomer that Black people and other BIPOC communities don't care about the environment. We do. And some of this money has to be only leveraged, and I'm glad that we're in a union hall today, because when we have strong unions, we have strong communities. But there has to be some additional programs that are not part of the IRA. There has to be some community ambassadors. There has to be some people that are tasked to make sure that they're going to find those people who are most centrally impacted and affected in order to use it. We talked about prevailing wage, but you also have Section 3. And so you have somebody that may be getting their street done, but they have to compete with people from 3 different counties in order to do that work. So yes, they're doing work in Warren, right? But now they're doing work from Macomb or Detroit. And that is not making sure that this money is actually impacted to actually make a change. And the second thing I want to say is we have to do a better job in telling the story. This is historic. The fact that the Congresswoman is here, the state is moving on all cylinders except with DTE, but they're moving in a direction that can set us on a course for the next 40 years if it's looked at the right way. This has to work. And so the normal systems that we've had to handle our infrastructure and the way that community resources get into the community has to be overhauled. The same way we look at healthcare, we have to look at pollution, we have to look at climate change, and we have to realize that it's a crisis, because all of the extra fees and things that we are having with inflation and cost of living are coming because people are not having the quality of life that they need in order to survive in Michigan. So if we can infuse not only the money that's there, but look at state supplementing, county supplementing, and city supplementing the people that actually go door to door to talk to these folks, then we'll make an impact. Because what good is having a program and not be able to use it? Churches can directly, see Eileen here, churches can directly apply for tax credits for upgrading their buildings right now. Yeah. How many people know they can do that? And so who is going to be tasked with that responsibility? I love all these documents and pages, but we can't just put these things on a website and realize people who have internet connectivity problems are actually going to go and do that when they're using it on their phone. So those are the things that we have to look at that are not in these actions, right? They're not in an act, that we have to create some additional dollars and have some additional conversation about leveraging this. And then we also have to make sure that our counties and communities are being able to do this, and they're able to sell it to their community when it's a choice between doing something cheaper and doing something right.
Kermit, I mean, those are obviously, I think, great points. And I want to I haven't introduced Amy O'Leary from the Southeastern Michigan Council of Government. She's their executive director. But when we look at that regional cooperation, and obviously I want to hear from some of the mayors and council members and commissioners here too. Can you talk a little bit about like how you guys at SEMCOG are approaching those challenges and what opportunities you're seeing for local government to do that sort of cooperation?
Yep, thanks. Hi, everybody. So Amy O'Leary, Executive Director. We have 184 local governments that are members of ours. So I think it's great that I get to speak after you, is that one of the things that you brought up was really making sure communities in the region's ready. And that has been a mantra of ours since IIJA and now IRA have come out, is our job at SEMCOG is to help local governments get ready. So whether that was working on an EV plan for the region and expanding it from the Tri-County to the 7-county. Today, actually, we're submitting for $10 million under Safe Streets for All, on the safety for walkability and bikeability. That dollar, if we receive it, directly will get passed through to the local governments. One of the things we see is that the local governments, some are very ready for these dollars and others aren't. And we think one of our jobs is to help get everybody ready and to work with them, because the federal government, you know, they do great websites, and they do great webinars, but we go and talk to the communities and meet with them. We just had some great meetings in River Rouge talking about some green infrastructure money we had, worked with them on a project to be able to move it forward. So being able to really understand what are the priorities in the communities and connecting it with these projects is what we're trying to do at SEMCOG. So Lindsay Kirkaz is here. One of the things that we are receiving is in partnership with the city of Detroit and the counties and a lot of the communities is kind of, they mentioned that the state will be doing a state, and I'm going to get this right, the state climate pollution prevention grant. But we at the region have the opportunity to do a regional climate plan, both in the short term, has to be done in less than 8 months, which is really fast, and then a longer term one as well. To me, one of the most important things it includes are what are those projects that are ready to go. And it will bring all of the people together to have the conversations about, you know, what are the important projects, and do we have the workforce to support those projects, and having all of that conversation now, it has to be pretty quick because we only have 8 months, so then we can apply for the implementation dollars. And we take that in all the different buckets we're trying that IIJA and the IRA offer as much as we can. So, thanks.
Hey Frank, I want to build off that because Amy said a lot of great things, and I think from our perspective, it's not just money, it's time. And time meeting people. And so Royal Oak, we've made some sacrifices. We've gone to the taxpayers on a couple of occasions, and we've set up our SCAP, which took years to build. So we have a plan on how we could use and spend these funds. We just gave permission to hire a sustainability manager, which means that we'll have somebody bird dogging with all of our departments, with all of our stakeholders at SEMCOG, and you name it, to really get the highest and best utility out of the funding that we get. And our philosophy is that if it's 10% of everybody's job, it's nobody's job. And one of the things we're facing as communities, and you'll see it here, Royal Oak is a decent-sized city, but we still had to make a sacrifice. To hire that sustainability manager, we put off hiring a recreation director, which is also an important service for people of all ages and groups in our community. But with the impact of the Headley Amendment over the years, inflation has gone way above the caps, and even in a community like Royal Oak, where we're seeing unprecedented investment, finding the money to pay for the people that can actually execute this at a local level, whether it's reaching out and talking to people, whether it's working with our small business owners so they can put things in place, is really a challenge. And unless we go to the voters every couple of years and say, hey, give us a millage so we can hire some people so we can live up to our values, that well gets tapped pretty well. So I think that one of the things we need to discuss as a state and as leaders here is how do we ensure that our local, and a lot of our local elected officials are all part-time too. Brandon's got a full-time job, I have a full-time job, and our city managers are all tasked more than ever with work and with less people than they had 10, 15, 20 years ago. So how do we solve that nut? The money is great, we want to take advantage of it. A city like Royal Oak is poised to do it well, I think, but I would venture to say a number of communities, especially those that are smaller than Royal Oak, are going to struggle because it's not, you can throw all the money you want at them, but unless they have the people and the time to execute, they're just grabbing shiny things versus doing it the right way. So thanks for that.
And we have Ann Erickson Gulp here too from the city of Troy, and I'll tell you what you guys have been doing on sustainability that preceded the passage of the IRA. It is so ripe for this moment. And in our district, we do our regular mayors and municipalities meeting. We're going to have one right as August work period kicks off. Probably, it might even be the end of this month. It's a long July, as we know. And so we'll have kind of a time to follow up on exactly what you're talking about here. And we really appreciate that, to bring folks together, because I've referenced your sustainability investment many times over. And this is another point about infrastructure infrastructure, but it's government infrastructure. Our communities got set up. Troy, blink a couple of eyes, a handful of decades ago, it was farmland. Now it's like Farmington Hills, it's one of our largest cities in Oakland County, and your government infrastructure is still set up for when you're farmland. And now we got dollars coming in, and we've got, like my good friend Kermit just said, we've got to succeed at this. We've got to succeed at this for Elizabeth's child, and we've got to succeed at this for the state of our economy and every family here. So, you know, I like what you said, Frank. It's not just the one conversation and done, but coming together today, very intentional, and something I've been looking forward to for quite some time. So thank you.
That's good prioritizing. And I want to allow other electeds obviously to weigh in, but I think you know, it was referenced a few times, the opportunities that have been put forward by IRA, like for instance the climate pollution reduction grants. These are things that you know the state has one application, our tribes can apply separately, and then Grand Rapids and Detroit as leaders of one of the 65 biggest metropolitan areas in the country, they can apply. But still, all these other communities not just out this neck of the woods, but from Ann Arbor, the Traverse City, are doing great things and are also able to compete for those federal dollars. But if we aren't doing that sort of collaboration and coordination and thinking through what communities have those gaps, and you know, not everyone can just say, oh, we just won't hire a recreation department director right now, we can do this. Or have the ability to bond, I mean, like when we look at accessing lead service line replacement funds, there's so many challenges that we need to be working through collaboratively. So I really appreciate the point, Mike.
And getting those lifts from other organizations to take a little bit off our plate too, because, you know, just like money, if you're spending it on one thing, you're not spending it on something else. It's the same thing with time. If you're not spending it on one thing, you're not spending it on something else. So, or if you're spending it on one thing, you're not spending it on something else.
And Julie and I were talking about this before we got here, but just to get specific, because I know we had a couple of questions on some segments of this legislation and the dollars coming down, but the $7 billion for solar for all. I mean, here's, folks, I mean, it's September 26th. I mean, that's around the corner for the application. Yep. And I'll tell you, I have a town hall a month, and we always provide, and this is why I'm tucking this document under my pillow. It will be with me everywhere I go, but the brilliance of the document is also the QR code, because we are in a race to be, you know, disseminating this information, accessing this information. And at our town halls, we also provide this. We've used Frank Mail and community advocates. So that's just another example here. Yeah, thank you.
We'll open up for, I know we're running late, but just open up for any last thoughts, questions, comments. And once again, we'll also allow time at the end for networking. I think the painters are still willing to let us tour the facility as we check.
It's a great tour.
Chickens. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Kevin Mayer with the Michigan Infrastructure Office. Just wanted to offer a couple of thoughts on, you know, some of the main points that have been raised here. Yeah, we hear a lot about capacity. We hear a lot about making sure that we're collaborating and thinking through opportunities holistically, right? And so capacity is one of the ones I hear most frequently about, people not having the capacity to go out these grants, to understand them, to digest all the different requirements. One of the things my office has done is set up a technical assistance fund where we will actually reimburse potential applicants, municipalities, counties, you know, companies, whoever's applying for a federal opportunity. You come to us, we'll point you to the direction of a list of the contractors you can work with and reimburse you to get some of this work done for you. So, you know, these are some of the things we're really thinking through. Yeah, we're quite excited about it.
We'll be tweeting that later.
Well, encourage
Or
you to look
threading
at
it. Yeah, whatever. I'm on.
I get a lot more calls. Zach, you're getting a lot more calls of it.
Certainly encourage everyone to look at our page, the Michigan Infrastructure Office.
Yeah,
There's other great tools. I think we're talking a little bit about the work we're doing with permitting reform, trying to streamline the permitting process and get some of these new projects up off the ground faster. Coordinating across state government. You know, we brought up broadband a few times. Happy to say 2 weeks ago we just received $1.55 billion in federal funds for broadband expansion. That's the
huge.
Fourth largest in the country, as a matter of fact, behind some of our biggest states, Texas and California.
And we're going to spend it, baby.
Oh, yeah. So there's also
in SEMCOG's actually working with them to run the technical assistance program for our region. So we have a group of elected officials that run a board for us on every grant decision. And so people can apply. We're working it out right now with them. They can apply for these funds. And it includes not just writing the grants, but there is a little bit of money available to match
hear earlier of great things in the budget. There's 337, I believe is the number, for the Michigan Competitive Fund, which will help us provide matching funds for federal opportunities for IIJA, IRA, and the CHIPS and Science Act. So we're doing our best to address a lot of the concerns being raised here, and it's great to hear them being talked about and thought about.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, we'll make sure our municipalities know about that.
Lovely. Thank you.
And thanks for being here. And I think that also just looking at that we've made these kind of unprecedented investments from a state level, as Senator Chang talked about earlier, that we have an infrastructure office and that's staffed and providing actual support to local communities, that we now have a growth office, and that we're and hopefully soon we'll have a just transition office, that we have an advocate of environmental justice. These are things that we're going to need to continue to make the case for if we're going to capitalize on all these federal dollars that are out there and bring in more, and also figure out at home how do we make sure there's sustained investments in these things that are long overdue, and promote the type of equity and real partnership with community that Kermit talked. Sir.
And Frank, to your point, the Department of Eagle, everybody knows what Eagle is our state level EPA. I mean, we're funding them. They have been literally divested from for decades. Yeah. And we're like literally we're following Justice 40 initiatives, and we're staffing them. It's going to take time. But a lot of the stuff that has happened is due to lack of personnel in the department. And the department has a lot of issues, but we're working on fully funding these departments. But a lot of this money from the feds, like Kermit talked about, is one-time funding. How do we make it sustainable? So that's what we're trying to figure out now. Me being on the pros, I'm racking my brain on it, and trying to figure out, okay, what are some revenue generators to keep this funding going? Because we do a lot sometimes in government, just putting a lot of money into one place, and we're saying, hey, go baby, go, and then it dries up a year, 2, 3 years from now, and then we're off to the next project. We can't leave our community hanging, not on this issue. So we're trying to figure it out.
I know we're wrapping up. I know folks probably have other thoughts. Based on where we're at, and I think just the importance of workforce opportunities here, I just want to give Robert, if you have any closing comments, or if you want me to ask John too, but just, I appreciate you guys hosting us, and I just think we can't just shortchange the importance of making sure workforce is centered in this. So just.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, we recognize the importance why, we had no issue hosting this event, and, very educational, great event. I'm real happy how it went out, everybody that showed up and all the discussion going on. But, with our organization, like many other trade organizations, there's a lot of money out there. Right now, there's a lot of work going. Mm-hmm. And, whether times are good or bad, this organization is constantly investing also, right, in the workforce. Just like everybody else is aging, we have a younger generation of workers, which is much different from when I was 20, right? Things are different now. We have the devices in our hands. It's just a different type of worker. So being able to, but they're smart people. So being able to deal with that, have them run through these apprenticeships, get them ready for building, right, the future infrastructure projects or building the roads. You see everything going on out there on the road today. Everything works hand in hand, right? So we know what we can do as an organization, right, and prepare workers, but we really rely heavily on the folks in this room to really talk it out and make that happen, educate us, so we can speak on this to other folks, and it really takes everybody that's here. So we're just glad to be doing our part, and we're happy to be involved.
And next time John will come and we'll get him some chicken shack.
And on that note, I won't keep everyone for more food and conversation, but thank you everyone for coming out. Thanks for all of our partners, including League of Conservation Builders, EDM, everyone on the panel, obviously all of our electeds who came out, and Robert, Chris, the Painters Group, John, virtually you can't hear me. Thank you everyone for being here today, and continue the mingle. And if anyone wants a tour, maybe grab Chris or Robert, and we can. Thank you.